Here we are again. The most concerning story I saw in the last 24 hours, Andy, is that the EFL expect to be starting again in 53 days. If the Premier League were thinking the same way, you and I will be on this balcony for some time yet.
Well, that's at best 53 days, you mean, as well. That's at best 53 days. But I've told you all along, in there they have a plan, Richard. They have a plan, they have a date. Whether they're releasing it now, because they don't want to, obviously, with the pandemic being in such, I mean, the UK is still in quite a bad state at the moment, so I don't think they can announce it, but I think they desperately want to get back, whether it's behind closed doors, which it will be, they just want to get back as soon as possible.
I agree with the latter last few words of that sentence. I don't with what you're saying in general, because I don't think anybody's got a plan right now. I think everybody is thinking the right way, but as to whether or not they can deliver, don't know. Anyway, thank you for your comments on the programme. It has been fun, it continues to be fun, and we'll also continue to bring you some of the very best guests that we can find from the Premier League going forward. We remain at a social distance, and as I've said many times during the making of this series, no Qatari regulations on COVID-19 have in any way been compromised. April the 15th, 31 years ago today, Hillsborough.
Today? You're joking.
96 people died. I always say,
oh, goodness.
96 died, but there were hundreds of victims, and there still are. And those that understand the story well, and we were privileged, Andy, to be invited in to actually, I think when we were on the radio, put it back on the front pages with the help of Steve Rotherham, the Labour MP at the time, now Mayor of Liverpool, Andy Burnham, Labour MP at the time, now Mayor of Manchester. Shocking what they tried to do to cover up what had gone on. Now eventually, of course, we know we got to the truth, despite the fact that Theresa May, then Home Secretary, didn't want for that to be the case, but we did get the truth. What the families have never had is justice.
Yeah. So two words that have been quoted since that day, truth and justice, haven't they? One we have.
We now know what happened. It was a cover-up. Everybody that was there on the day knew there was a cover-up. Some of the stories that you and I subsequently were sharing with the families of those who died, Andy, were just shocking.
They were shocking.
So thoughts today for everybody still involved in what happened at Hillsborough 31 years ago. 1.8 billion. That's the figure that they suggest has been slashed off values of Premier League sides, debts due to banks, and why the transfer market will collapse, according to the story in the Daily Mail today, as Jadon Sancho, Harry Kane and Kylian Mbappe might see £100 million plus moves scuppered.
Throw Neymar in there as well. Paris Saint-Germain have two of them. Two of the world's most expensive footballers they bought.
Andy, 1.8 billion.
Yeah, are you surprised?
Well, that's why I said yesterday with Manchester United talking, or but I have to be careful, and maybe United aren't, but others are speculating around what United might be spending. It's the wrong time to be doing that, isn't it, really? 50 years ago tonight, the Battle of Britain.
Yes.
Do you remember?
I do remember it well.
Where were you?
I was in Glasgow. I was a baby, still at school, obviously, and because it was Celtic, a team who I didn't like.
Still done. It's too late, it's out.
It's too late. Well, listen.
The Battle of Britain was the second leg of a European Cup game between Leeds United, then the powerhouse in England.
Oh, without a doubt. Don Revie,
Celtic.
Billy Bremner,
I've got
Peter
one question
Lorimer,
for you.
Eddie Gray.
As I read the stories this morning, I don't understand. Why did Celtic take it to Hampden?
Crowd. I think crowd. Now, listen, I can't imagine that Parkhead was undergoing renovation.
You can't just choose which stadium you want to play in.
They did then.
100.
When do you know what I honestly think? I've always thought they'd demand 135,000, if memory serves me well, ish.
I'll tell you, very good. 136,505.
Wow.
What a ground.
Well, she had been in that ground at a Rangers Celtic Cup final. I think the night, it was a Wednesday night, Richard, and a Rangers fullback called Kai Johansson, you won't know him, you won't remember him, but a Rangers fullback called Kai Johansson
My dad
scored.
told me all about him. Good
Yeah,
player,
really.
wasn't he?
So, I was at the Rangers end, and there was 145,000 in Hampden that night. And the thing about the Rangers end, now the Celtic end was always uncovered, right? So when it rained, Celtic fans got rained on.
You like that?
Well, we had the cover around us, we were lucky. We were lucky. But you know the steps that you went on, they weren't solid, they weren't concrete, they were dirt. So when Rangers scored, when Kai Johansson scored in the second half, I think it was, and we won the game 1-0, suddenly everyone jumped about, and the dust is going everywhere. You couldn't see a thing for 10 minutes because of dust. It was just an extraordinary place to be, Hampden, packed like that. So I've been in there with 145,000 in it. That night, only 135,000 for, I think, security reasons.
And Celtic won it.
Yeah.
Bertie Auld, who's now in his 80s, star of the show that night.
Did Billy Bremner score for Leeds first? I think he did.
Yes, I think
you're right. Leeds went 1 up. I'm sure Billy Bremner scored, put Leeds 1 up.
Enough of that. Right back up to date with this article from the Mail. I said yesterday to you, it's the Championship, the league that everybody's looking at and saying that's where the really big trouble is. One Championship side, according to this article by Jack Gaughan, one Championship side spend nearly all their television money on one player's salary.
Wow.
One player.
And the Championship?
In the Championship. In League One, there's what they call a bench warmer.
How can you do that? Surely that's against financial fair play
No.
regulations.
Well, we'll get round to that.
Okay.
League One, there's someone in League One that takes home 400,000 a year. I'm guessing Sunderland.
Me too.
And League Two wage budgets dwarf those in the top Scottish league. 10 clubs could go to the wall, they're talking about.
Well,
and now.
Yeah, listen, we've talked about right at the beginning of this. I said to you, if we come through this with 71 league teams still intact, I will be absolutely gobsmacked. I don't think there's any chance of that happening.
See, I've never been a fan of the idea of salary caps until now. The EFL are talking about it. They're close to voting for salary caps to safeguard their futures. Again, this is from the Mail. The move, which could come into effect in 2021, has been discussed due to the perilous state of obviously some clubs' finances. I've always thought with salary caps, they're just so easy to get round. The same as academy. This is a complicated area to get into, category 1, 2. But academies, if you want a player badly enough, you move him and the family to within the 25-mile radius in which you operate. There is one classic case of a club wanting a player so badly, they moved the player, the dad, mum, into the area. The dad then went on to work as a football agent, and the money was covered by the club to the agency that employed him. Seriously.
Well, I think, listen, whatever happens, players will be getting, I feel sure, like you, players will be having to accept smaller salaries than the ones they've been used to
I
ongoing.
repeat what I have said here time and again. The bubble has burst.
But to what extent? That's what we don't know.
Bournemouth done a U-turn. They're not now furloughing staff, which is absolutely right. And this is quite interesting. Back page of the Mail again. Peace deal one. There are two here they talk about. One is the EFL deal in Leagues 1 and 2, which has been agreed with the PFA. But top clubs are eyeing an historic truce to prevent them from poaching each other's players. So if a player's salary is reduced or a contract runs out, although Infantino is talking about we'll extend that period, and you know that's something that I'm just don't think is workable, and legally it's not workable. But they're saying because contracts would be compromised and therefore players would become free agents. We're not going to poach each other's players. We'll see.
Well, that's good in theory, but it requires not one single club to waver if that's going to be implemented.
That will happen. Now, Simon Jordan, who's I always like to say a friend of the show, he's spoken to many times, a former Crystal Palace owner who lost the best part of 35 million during his time at Palace. He wasn't the only one. Mark Goldberg did. Simon now works in the media, and he's come up with a 5-point plan. I'd like to run this past you to seize control back from players and agents. So in other words, the game gets control back. Point 1, salary caps across leagues linked to a percentage of turnover. For example, 50%. This would reduce Premier League and Championship wage bills, he says, by 625 million a year.
You see, what confused me about I thought already clubs were not allowed to spend more than a percentage of their income on wages.
Well, no, that's not the case necessarily. And you
Right.
try enforcing those laws. There's all kinds of. I mean, Sheffield Wednesday are a club with problems at the moment. Derby County, your very own Everton,
Yes.
who allegedly breached financial fair play by taking 30 million from the owner of your club for naming rights of a new stadium that one brick hasn't even been laid
But
to build
listen,
yet.
they put that out for tender. They wanted to get in quickly
Did they really?
before somebody got it from them.
So Simon says the transfer
No,
market.
I don't mind that. I agree with that one.
Yep, absolutely. The transfer market has to change so clubs get their other major outlay under control. He says a net allowance of 20% of the previous year's turnover on transfer spend. 20% of your turnover
Yeah.
from the previous year.
Yeah. What are they turning over then? What would Manchester United be turning over in a year? Do you know? You any ideas?
I would think. Yeah.
700 million?
Yeah.
Something like that. So they, what is he saying, 10% of that? 70 million?
20%.
20%. So 40 million. Say they're 700. 10%, 74, well, 140 million on players. I suppose that's okay, isn't it?
Transfer window to be abolished. Couldn't agree more. Before I read on. Could not agree more. It's created a bad business market, he says, specifically ratcheted up January prices, which is true. The market should instead be open all the year round for clubs to trade at times when their cash flow allows it.
The old one was, the old way was not a bad way, Richard. It really was. The only thing I had with the old system was, and it cost me a couple of times, was that if you played for, say, if I played for Aston Villa like I did, and I went to Everton, if I went in September, October, November, and I had played in a League Cup tie or an FA Cup tie, I couldn't then play for my new club in the Cup, and it cost me at Everton when it was the first Merseyside final, because I'd played one game for Wolves in the League Cup.
Well, that was because we used to, it was afraid, well, it still is.
Cup
That's
tie.
why I think it's an unworkable, if this doesn't change, March the 17th, I think, was the cut-off date, you were cup tied. Now, it's still the case today, if the January window shuts and you've played in the FA Cup third round, not the fourth, but you move clubs before the end of that January, you're still cup tied. I think that's grossly unfair.
That's the only thing I would say. Apart from that, if you go to your club, you should play for them, whatever cup tie it is, whatever it is, whoever it's for, it shouldn't account. But I do agree, come to March, whatever it was, it used to be March the 15th, there should be a cut-off.
Here's another one I think he's right about. Agents should only be able to act for one party, either the club or the player. They should be reduced to 5% commission and levies of between 3 to 5% placed on that commission. That would put another 15 million back into the football pyramid. Yeah?
Yeah. Don't disagree with that.
Nor me.
No, I think that it's ridiculous to think that a club can call up an agent and say, listen, we're looking for this player. He happens to be my player. Okay, I'll do the deal for you, and then I'll go and do the deal for him.
Don't you think the player should be paying the commission involved in the money that takes him from club A to B?
Yes.
Not the club covering it on his behalf.
Yes, that's what used to happen. It happened when I was getting transferred. It happened in that day, early in the Premier League history. It was the player's responsibility to deal with his agent's fees. Yes. Now he does the deal with the club.
This one may be a little more controversial. The PFA should be stripped of its £27 million a year gift from the Premier League after their divisive. It's typical Simon. After their divisive and destructive behaviour in this crisis. Instead, it should be given to grassroots football funded by its own members. If players had to pay the 27 million, it works out to be 0.75% of their salaries. So the average Premier League player would pay just 27,000 a year. Now, I do think the top earners could afford to do that.
Well, I think players pay into the PFA, don't they?
But it's buttons.
Yeah, I know it's
The
buttons.
27 million.
And the only thing about that, what I would say about Simon, yeah, I get that the PFA, Premier League players, to a lesser effect, need PFA to intervene in very much of what they do, Richard. Very little.
Well,
little of what they do.
Up until the last few weeks,
Yeah, but
it's
what's
come
what I'm
home to
saying.
roost.
So they've not needed the PFA. I've hardly ever known a Premier League player have to go to the PFA cap in hand or for helping this or for helping that. The PFA would predominantly the second division, the first division, the Championship. There are loads of players down there that have had to go to the PFA, have had to go to Gordon Taylor and his union and ask for help alongside, whether it's advice, whether it's monetarily. There's where it's needed, the PFA. Less so in the Premier League, I would agree, but certainly in the lower leagues, they need the power of the Premier League to fight their causes sometimes.
Going forward, and I can see one immediately, one that I have referred to a lot, that is that June 30 cut-off point.
Yeah.
UEFA have no legal base on which to say we will extend contracts for players to continue to perform with the clubs they're currently contracted to. That's not going to happen. Now here's always easy. We all of us have said something we wished we hadn't at different times.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Paul Pogba bites back, and Graeme Souness has bitten in response.
Oh no, is he?
I wish I'd been able to talk to him ahead of what I think Graeme is a very undignified response in this
you see,
round.
I know what you're going to tell me, Pogba, but obviously probably viewers don't. So what did Pogba say?
Graeme has a deep dislike of Paul Pogba.
Right. Okay.
And he's not hidden that.
Right.
All season long.
Yeah.
He has been a very vocal critic of the midfield play. Graeme,
Okay.
I would have loved to have played against him. And by the way, he would have chewed him up. But Pogba, in response, he's been talking about his time at Manchester United and having gone missing this season, which he has said, well, I'd never heard of Graeme Souness.
Really?
Now, Graham's response was, oh yeah, well, put your medals on the table.
No.
Yeah.
No. No.
See,
Graeme.
I did that, and mine's a very big table.
Oh.
Now, had I been able to speak to him in advance of him getting that upset, I would have said, Graeme, your response has to be, I'm not surprised he's never heard of me. I'm a football man. Which I think would have been better, don't you?
Well, Graeme has fallen into the trap that a lot of players have had criticism over the years, don't like it, and have a bucket full of medals, throw that one out. The only worst thing he could have said, but he probably didn't, because Pogba earns far more money than Graeme ever could. The only other one the modern football will trot out is, well, how much are you earning?
Yeah.
What's in your bank account?
That's
right? That's horrible. But Graeme's is the professional way of belittling somebody.
But you see, if he'd said, I'm a football man, he would have underlined the fact that Pogba isn't.
I'm surprised at Graeme.
Pogba does the
I
job
really am.
and does it obviously very well,
Yeah.
and he's rewarded extremely well for doing it, but he's not a football man. And you and I know down the years there have been many like that.
Yeah.
I can think of a Scottish centre-back would have preferred to have played golf. I can think of an England forward who's made good money out of the game, but has never enjoyed it and still doesn't. So I just think if he'd said, I remember driving to Blackburn when Phil Thompson took temporary charge of Liverpool during a time of, was it Gerard Houllier's illness? And Graeme and Tomo had fallen out spectacularly as players when Graeme took over as captain from Tomo.
Who made that decision? Which manager? That was a big one.
Bob Paisley.
Oh, Bob, okay.
Yeah. It was a year when Liverpool were, to quote Graeme, struggling at Christmas, but went on to win everything. But from that point, Tomo and Graeme had fallen out. It didn't work out when they were working together with Graeme as coach at Liverpool. He ended up sacking him after he felt Tomo had too much to say about his illness, the heart issues that he had. So Liverpool go to Blackburn for a league game, Tomo in temporary charge, Graeme manager of Blackburn. And I rang him to say, what are you going to say? How are you going to handle this? Of course, he was in the gym. Spends more time in the gym, Graeme, than anywhere else.
That's true.
I don't know. What do you think? I said, well, I would go and find him. I would shake his hand, and that'll be the end of it. No one's ever going to mention this row again. If you ignore him,
makes sense.
That's going to make more headlines.
It's got to fuel headlines.
You'll get 24 hours of headlines done.
So what did you do?
He rang me back and said, make sure your cameras pick it up. And I told the director that day, we picked it up, that he went to the dugout, shook hands, went to his, that's it, done.
Right. And let me just add that, can I add my two penneth in regards as footballers? Right? Anybody who saw Graeme Souness play, knows his career, played with him, as I did, luckily, for Scotland a few times, and has seen, and I've only seen Paul Pogba, I haven't played with him, so I can only judge him in what I've seen. No, there's no comparison.
Oh,
no,
I didn't play.
Souness all day long.
Oh.
Souness all day long, and it's not a jock thing, it's not Scots together. I'm talking purely in the merits as a footballer. And
I always say, in defence of Graeme, and I think you'll agree with me, because he had a reputation, well, deserved.
Merited.
He loved the sight of blood. I mean, loved the sight of blood. But that rather took the attention away from what a good player he was. Either foot.
Yes.
Magnificent, Andy.
Good athlete.
Magnificent.
The occasional goal. Great leader. Great leader. So there's no comparison. Footballers, in my opinion, and Manchester United fans might not agree with me, I don't care, but in my opinion, as footballers, there's only one winner.
From the Times today, players will need astronaut-style isolation in order to return. St George's Park has been suggested, the home of English football, where there are 2 hotels. I think there are 13 pitches. Look, I keep saying it, we all want our football back, but not until it's safe. And all these half thought through schemes are great to keep us on the edge of our seats, but if you can't deliver, and I don't think any of the plans I've heard so far are going then let's just stop speculating and wait until it's safe.
I think that they're just hanging on. They're throwing out little carrots to supporters who are desperate to see football played again, like we all are. But no one really knows when. No one really knows if. No one really knows what shape it will take, Richard, if the truth be known.
Well,
I think that's what they're just waiting on.
Dr. Ralph Rogers here, doctor's view they've got in the Times. To protect the staff and the players, clubs would need to know where everyone has been, who they've been with, who those people in turn have been with. Clubs would have to control not only the players' environment, but that of everyone connected with them and the staff. Players like to get close, shake hands and have a little bit of fun. Can you stop that? Will players wash their hands sufficiently? Do you know whether that's the case? Should players have to install a surveillance app to track their movements? All of these, and there's more. The list goes on.
Wow.
All of these things are fair enough. Although Marouane Fellaini, good news, discharged after 3 weeks in a Chinese hospital suffering with COVID-19.
Oh, right, okay.
Which we didn't know.
No, we didn't know. No, that's kept quiet.
But that is good news.
Yes.
And I'd like to know your thoughts on this. Matthew Saeed today, every great team needs an invisible genius. And the point he's making is he said he was commissioned to write David Beckham's book, Ghostwriter. And he said, by way of homework, I asked Manchester United to send me all sorts of tapes watching David play. And he said, my eye kept going to Dennis Irwin, to Dennis Irwin, to Dennis Irwin. Silent genius. He gives the example of a game at Arsenal where Dennis passed the ball back to the keeper, Bergkamp nipped in, scored. And of course the questions for Fergie afterwards were, well, what about that? And he said, well, one mistake in 10 years is not bad. Does every team need a silent genius like that?
Well, if Matthew's saying, was he silent on the pitch, he didn't shout and rave like Roy Keane did, the way what was Scholesy? Is he a silent genius?
Yeah, I would say so.
Do you know what I mean? It depends what you mean by the word silent. I mean, Dennis Irwin's ability as a footballer.
Well, no, silent maybe silent. Let's replace
unsung.
Silent with ghost.
Unsung.
You didn't notice. Scholesy you would always see.
Yeah. I think every team has a player, and you think, oh, he doesn't get many headlines, but we'd be a lot poorer without him. When I look back at the great Everton side, Reedy in the middle of midfield was the one who gathered all the headlines without a shadow of a doubt. But talk to Peter, and he will wax lyrically about Paul Bracewell, like we all did. Paul Bracewell was like that. He was like Dennis Irwin, didn't say much, but I guarantee you, we would rather be on the pitch with Paul on the side than without Paul on the side. He to us was opposed Manchester United's Dennis Irwin. He just got on with the job. He was 8, 9 out of 10 every game he played. Didn't say too much vocally, didn't get involved physically. Whereas Reedy and I would be fighting with everyone on the pitch.
No.
Not quite silent assassins, but loud brutes. But Paul Bracewell would fit that silent genius, not silent genius, what was he?
The ghost, let's call him a ghost.
The ghost. He was like that, Paul, for us. All the others at the back, Pat Van Den Hal was vocal. Kevin Ratcliffe
Go
Skipper
back to
was
another
never
era.
so.
Martin Peters, of course, was
Yes.
actually called the ghost for what he did. So Mark Palios here, who we spoke to very early in these series of unplugged programmes. This week, he says, article here in the Telegraph, this week will define the future of the Football League and the very survival of many clubs. That's how serious it is.
This week?
This week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll see. It'll be an interesting show next week then.
And the row in Scotland rumbles on, with Partick Thistle issuing legal challenges now over the plans to end the season. That's something we were talking to Keith Alexander about.
No decision been made up there yet, no?
No decision made.
No, okay.
And from the Times today, no full stadiums for 18 months, says a doctor in the States here, until a vaccine exists. Well,
yeah, well, we don't know.
Dr. Zach
I get
Binnigan,
that.
epidemiologist at the Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, thinks that it will not be possible for fans to attend sports events until a vaccine exists for coronavirus.
Okay. Might be a while then.
That's not saying
Football's not starting. Or sport's not starting.
there are plans in the States. In that same article, they talk about basketball matches being played on cruise ships. I mean, how desperate are we? So,
And the difference being?
well, the ship is offshore and you can control the environment. You tell me.
Can you? Contact sport. Again, it's a contact sport. In basketball,
I think that's how keen we all are.
Yeah, I said that to you. I think yesterday was. I think it's so important. Saving lives is the most important thing. So let me put that right out there right away. Saving lives and protecting lives is the most important thing, and getting this horrible virus under control. But there's absolutely no doubt, Richard. Each week that goes on, you talk to people, you listen to sports people. I'm not just talking football. I'm talking about all sports now. You know, I've listened to the radio yesterday. There was a couple of lads who were on about at this time of year the cricket season would be in full swing. People would be out watching that. Golf would have had a couple of majors by now. The Masters,
we would.
You know, all these sort of things
And we'd have named
happened.
our young player and player of the year by now as well.
Yeah, we would have done.
Very, very briefly, and you have little or no time to do it. Correction to the Sunderland series 2, Charlie Methven, by the way. I couldn't work for Charlie.
Could you
anyway, the gate that he claimed Sunderland had set a new record with, 40,000 plus.
Yes.
If you haven't seen it, sorry, but you'll get around to it. The 40,000 plus for the Boxing Day game.
Against
he said
Leeds.
it was the biggest third-tier crowd of all time. No,
I know, and it's funny. As soon as I was watching that, and I called you, and I said, what I didn't know, having played for Villa, I knew when Villa were in the third division, the old third division, third tier, same one, third tier, that they used to get unbelievable crowds.
Yeah.
Now it was a top division clash, Aston Villa against Bournemouth, right? And I looked it up, and yes, the official attendance given for the Sunderland game was 46,000.
Yes.
Came to. The attendance at Villa Park was 48,000, I think, 110. So the highest crowd at a league game in the third tier is Villa Park.
One word. Could you have worked with and for Charlie?
No.
We'll see you back.
He was a boy.
We will see you back here tomorrow. Stay safe, please.